Hi there, welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight, we enter a mystery touched by shadows and whispers of the unseen. At the heart of it lies a silver key, gleaming, yet cursed by the hand of phantom. Why does this key appear only to vanish again? What secret door does it unlock? And what horrors lie waiting behind it? Join us as Hercule Poirot confronts a puzzle where reality blurs with illusion, and every step deeper takes us closer to the truth or to the phantom itself. If you love these mysteries, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Haunting Vales, and ring the bell for more Poirot cases. Chapter 1. The Arrival of the Silver Key. The autumn wind rattled the windows of Whitehaven Manor, a vast estate perched on the cliffs of Dover. Below, the sea roared with an unrelenting fury, crashing against the rocks as though trying to swallow the land whole. It was a night of heavy clouds, when the moon dared not show its face, and the shadows inside the manor seemed darker than usual. It was on such a night that Hercule Poirot arrived. The great detective, his mustache meticulously waxed, his boots polished to a reflective shine, stepped from the motor car and into the sweeping courtyard. He carried a small valise, though he would be staying for several days, and wore his usual immaculate attire, a dark overcoat, perfectly tailored suit, and gloves that had not a speck of dust upon them. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, peering up at the manor's looming facade. It is as though the house itself wishes to frighten its visitors. Whitehaven Manor belonged to Lord Edmund Willoughby, an aging aristocrat with an enviable collection of antiques. His invitations were rare, and those who received them often found themselves in the midst of eccentric company. This time, Poirot had been summoned not for social amusement, but for a puzzle. A letter had arrived at his London flat only 3 days earlier, written in a trembling hand. "Monsieur Poirot, a key of silver, unlike any other, has come into my possession. It carries with it a phantom, one that whispers in the dark and threatens more than my peace of mind. I beg of you, come to Whitehaven Manor at once. Without your wisdom, I fear the consequences will be grave." Willoughby. Poirot found the phrasing melodramatic, almost theatrical, but he never ignored such requests. More than once, a seemingly fanciful story had led to real danger. As he ascended the stone steps, the great door opened with a groan. A butler of stern demeanor and pale complexion bowed slightly. "Monsieur Hercule Poirot?" "Oui, c'est moi." "This way, sir. Lord Willoughby awaits you in the drawing-room." The drawing-room was a cavernous space lined with shelves of dusty tomes, cabinets filled with ancient relics, and paintings of long-forgotten ancestors who seemed to watch from the walls. A fire blazed in the hearth, though it did little to soften the air of unease. Lord Edmund Willoughby, tall and frail, rose slowly from his chair. His face was as lined as parchment, his hair snowy white, and his eyes, though tired, still sharp. "Poirot," he said, extending a bony hand. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Poirot inclined his head. "One does not ignore a plea such as yours, my lord. You speak of a silver key and of a phantom." Lord Willoughby glanced over his shoulder, as though fearful that the shadows might overhear. He gestured to a small box resting on the mantelpiece. "Inside, you will find it." Poirot crossed the room, his patent leather shoes tapping softly on the floor. He lifted the lid of the box. Within lay a key, no longer than his palm, crafted entirely of silver. But it was no ordinary key. Its teeth were jagged in an unusual pattern, and the bow, where one would normally find a simple loop, was fashioned into the shape of a skull. The metal gleamed even in the dim light, as though it had been polished only moments before. Poirot picked it up delicately. "Ah, intriguing. It is of fine craftsmanship. And this skull, it is not a symbol one associates with mere decoration. Tell me, how came you by it?" Lord Willoughby sank back in his chair, his voice dropping to a whisper. It was delivered 3 nights ago. No messenger was seen, no carriage heard. Only a box left at the doorstep, addressed to me. And since that night, he hesitated, his hand trembling. I have heard it. A voice. Soft, cold, and hollow. It speaks when the house is still, calling my name from the corridors. Last evening, I awoke to find the key not upon the mantel where I'd left it, but upon my pillow. And yet my doors were locked. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A phantom key that moves of its own will? Non, mon ami, there is always explanation. The supernatural, it does not interest Poirot, but human mischief. Ah, that is where the truth lies. Willoughby gave a weary smile. Perhaps, yet I confess I'm not so sure. I have lived long, Monsieur Poirot, but never have I felt such dread. Poirot returned the key to its box and closed the lid. Then we must discover the trick, n'est-ce pas? Tell me, who resides in the house? Myself, of course, and Lady Margaret, my wife. My nephew Charles, who arrived only last week. And the staff, Benson, the butler you have met, Mrs. Havers, the housekeeper, and 2 maids. That is all. And you suspect one among them? Willoughby shook his head. I do not know what to suspect. Poirot seated himself, steepling his fingers. He studied the fire for a moment before speaking. In a murder of Roger Ackroyd, I encountered a case where the truth was hidden by the one least expected. In Murder on the Orient Express, the guilty were many, not one. And in Death on the Nile, love itself became the mask of treachery. Take comfort, Lord Willoughby, whatever secret this silver key holds, Hercule Poirot shall uncover it. The old man exhaled, relief softening his features. At that moment, the door opened and a woman entered. She was tall, elegant, her gown of deep blue velvet sweeping across the carpet. Her hair, though streaked with silver, retained the luster of youth, and her bearing was regal. Margaret, said Willoughby, this is Monsieur Poirot. Lady Margaret inclined her head. Monsieur, my husband has placed great trust in you. I do hope you are not one to dismiss old legends. Legends, madam, are stories. Stories, they are puzzles. And puzzles, Poirot tapped a finger against his temple. They are what I solve. Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed unease. Then you shall need all your skill. For the legend of the silver key is no invention. It is said to belong to the phantom of Whitehaven, an apparition that guards a treasure hidden within these walls. Many have searched, none have found, and those who tried too hard, her voice faltered, they met with ruin. Poirot lifted his brows. And you believe this key to be that very object? Believe it. She gestured toward the box. It has already begun its work. The butler entered once more, announcing supper. The household gathered in the dining hall. Lord and Lady Willoughby, young Charles, and Poirot. Charles was a striking young man in his late 20s, with dark hair and eyes that sparkled with mischief. He greeted Poirot with enthusiasm. So, you're the great detective I've heard so much about. Splendid. Perhaps you'll solve this family ghost story once and for all. Personally, I find it all rather thrilling. Poirot regarded him steadily. Thrilling, yes. But danger, it is not a game, Monsieur Charles. The young man only laughed. Dinner passed with strained politeness. Poirot observed carefully. The glances exchanged, the silences held too long, the way Lady Margaret's hand shook as she lifted her glass. When at last the meal concluded, Poirot retired to the guest chamber prepared for him. Yet even as he prepared for sleep, his little gray cells were most active. A key that moved on its own. A phantom said to guard a treasure. A family waited with fear and perhaps secrets. Poirot had faced many puzzles before, but this one promised to be among the strangest. Sometime past midnight, Poirot awoke. A sound echoed faintly through the corridor, a whisper, long and low. He sat upright, straining to listen. Edmund. The voice was barely audible, yet chilling. Poirot rose, donned his robe, and stepped into the hall. The lamps flickered as though disturbed by a draught, though all the windows were shut. Again the whisper. Edmund. Poirot followed, his steps careful, precise. The sound seemed to draw him toward the library. He pushed open the heavy door. Inside, the fire had burned low, shadows dancing upon the shelves. And upon the mantel, the box was open. The silver key was gone. Poirot felt a shiver, not of fear, but of realization. Someone within the house was at play. Someone who wished to turn fear into truth. He closed the door behind him, his voice firm in the silence. Bon, let the phantom have his games. But Hercule Poirot will play also. And in this game, he always wins. Chapter 2, Shadows in the Manor. Morning came to Whitehaven Manor not with warmth, but with a pale and reluctant light that seeped through the mist. The cliffs below were veiled in fog, and the sea was muffled, as if nature itself wished to conceal the house from prying eyes. Poirot rose early, as was his custom. His attire was, as ever, impeccable. Dark trousers with a crease sharp enough to cut paper, a waistcoat of fine gray wool, and a tie knotted with mathematical precision. Standing before the mirror, he gave his mustaches their usual flourish. Courage, yes, petites cellules grise, he said softly. There is a phantom in this house, yes? Then we shall unmask him. He descended to the breakfast room, where he found Charles already at the table. The young man was dressed in a casual tweed suit, his expression one of lazy amusement. Ah, Monsieur Poirot, Charles said cheerfully, pouring himself coffee. Did you sleep well? I confess, I was hoping for some ghostly visitation, but alas, nothing disturbed my slumber. Poirot seated himself with quiet grace. On the contrary, monsieur, I myself was disturbed. The whisper, it came again. And the silver key, poof, it has vanished. Charles raised his brows in mock astonishment. Vanished? Good heavens! Then it seems our phantom is growing bold. Lady Margaret entered just then, her face drawn, her eyes shadowed by lack of sleep. She placed a trembling hand upon the back of her chair before sitting. It was no dream, Monsieur Poirot, she whispered. I too heard it. The voice had called my husband's name, and when I went to his chamber, Edmund was pale as death. Poirot inclined his head. And where is Lord Willoughby now? In his study. He insists he must work, though he is clearly unwell. Poirot buttered his toast with meticulous strokes, though his mind was racing. A phantom that whispered only Edmund's name, a key that appeared and disappeared with impossible ease. These are no simple tricks. Yet he reminded himself, all mysteries have roots in human hands. He excused himself after breakfast and went directly to the study. Lord Willoughby sat at a heavy desk, his posture slumped, his eyes sunken. Papers lay scattered before him, though it was clear he had read none. Ah, Poirot, he said hoarsely, you have seen? The key is gone. Oui, my lord. But nothing, it is never gone forever. It will reappear when it suits the one who plays this game. Lord Willoughby closed his eyes. You think it is trickery. I know it is so. The question is not whether it is a trick, but who is the conjurer. He glanced about the study. Heavy curtains framed the windows. A globe stood in the corner, and shelves sagged with leather-bound volumes. Nothing seemed out of place, save for a painting upon the wall. It depicted a knight in armor, holding aloft a silver key. Poirot stepped closer, narrowing his eyes. This painting, it is unusual, non? Willoughby nodded. It is said to be centuries old. The knight is Sir Alaric Willoughby, my ancestor. He was rumored to have hidden a great treasure within Whitehaven Manor. The key in his hand is said to be the same one delivered to me. Poirot touched the frame lightly. So the legend, it is not new. And where there is a legend of treasure, there are always those who would seek to profit. Willoughby shivered. You must find the truth, Poirot. Before this phantom does more than whisper. Poirot promised he would, then made his way to the library. He found the housekeeper, Mrs. Havers, dusting the shelves with brisk efficiency. She was a stout woman with sharp eyes, the sort who missed nothing. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "tell me, last night, who was awake after the household retired?" Mrs. Havers straightened, her lips pursed. "I cannot say, sir. I was in my room by 10. But I'll tell you this. Young Master Charles is too curious for his own good. Always prowling about, asking questions, sneaking into places he shouldn't." Poirot's mustaches twitched. "Ah, curiosity, it is a dangerous quality. Merci, madame." He left the library deep in thought. Charles had indeed seemed amused by the whole affair, almost eager for excitement. Yet Poirot never allowed first impressions to blind him. Innocence could mask guilt, and guilt could mask innocence. Later that morning, Poirot explored the corridors of Whitehaven. He moved with slow precision, noting every creak in the floorboards, every draft that whispered through the halls. At one point, he paused before a locked door. It was plain, unmarked, and bore no sign of recent use. He tapped gently, but there was no answer. Just then, Lady Margaret appeared behind him. "That door," she said quietly, "leads to the east wing. It has been closed for years. The rooms there are unsafe, decaying floors, damp walls. My husband insists it remain locked." Poirot bowed slightly. "But it has the look, madam, of a door that wishes to be opened." She said nothing, only turned away, her velvet gown trailing behind her like a shadow. By noon, the mist had lifted somewhat, and the sun cast a wan light across the cliffs. Poirot joined the family for luncheon, though the atmosphere was strained. Lord Willoughby scarcely touched his food, Lady Margaret spoke little, and Charles maintained an almost mocking levity. It was during this meal that Poirot received confirmation of his suspicions. A maid entered with a silver tray, and upon it lay the very key that had vanished. "Begging your pardon, my lord," she said nervously, "I found this upon the grand staircase. I thought it best to bring it here." Gasps filled the room. Lady Margaret clutched at her pearls, Lord Willoughby turned ashen, and Charles let out a low whistle. "Well, well," he murmured, "our phantom has a sense of drama." Poirot rose slowly, his eyes fixed upon the gleaming key. He lifted it with delicate fingers and examined it closely. "Bon, it returns as I said it would. But notice, Mies Amos, there is not a trace of dust or fingerprint upon it, as though it has been polished. Then someone in this house is responsible?" Lady Margaret asked. Poirot gave a small nod. "Without doubt. And it is to be discovered who. For the phantom, he is no spirit, but flesh and blood." The afternoon passed in a haze of unease. Servants whispered in corners, doors creaked with unseen movements, and more than once Poirot felt the prickle of unseen eyes upon his back. That evening, the household gathered once more in the drawing-room. The fire roared, casting flickering shadows upon the walls. Lord Willoughby sat hunched, his hands clutching the arms of his chair as though for strength. Lady Margaret's gaze never strayed far from her husband. Charles lounged by the hearth, his eyes bright with anticipation. It was then that Poirot spoke, his voice calm but firm. "My friends, I have considered carefully. There is a pattern in these events, and patterns, they are the bread of Hercule Poirot. The key, it appears only at night. It is placed where it will be noticed, in the bedroom, upon the staircase, always where fear may be sown. The whisper, it calls only to Lord Willoughby. The phantom does not seek to kill, not yet. It seeks to terrify." Charles smirked. "So you believe it's someone in the house, trying to scare my uncle?" Poirot's eyes glinted. "I do not believe, monsieur. I know. And soon, we shall see the face behind the mask." At that moment, a sudden gust of wind burst through the room, though every window was closed. The lamps flickered violently, the fire guttered, and from the corridor beyond came a chilling whisper, clearer now, more insistent. "Edmund, the key, the key." Lady Margaret cried out. Lord Willoughby rose to his feet, trembling violently. Charles stared wide-eyed, his mockery silenced at last. Poirot alone remained composed. He stepped into the corridor, his gaze sharp, his mind calculating. The whisper faded, leaving only silence. But upon the floor, at the very threshold of the study, lay the silver key once more. Poirot bent, lifted it carefully, and held it to the light. "Bon," he murmured. "The phantom grows reckless. He reveals himself, little by little. And soon, the truth, it will shine brighter than silver." He turned back to the household, his expression grave. "Tonight, yes, Amos, I ask that none leave their chambers after dark. Lock your doors, remain within. For Hercule Poirot will walk the halls of Whitehaven Manor alone. And when the phantom comes again, his mustaches quivered with determination, he will find that the hunter has become the hunted." Chapter 3. Whispers of the Past. The night descended upon Whitehaven Manor with an almost theatrical gloom. Clouds smothered the moon, and the sea below the cliffs raged in restless fury, as though echoing the tension within the house. Poirot, ever precise, prepared himself as though for battle. He dressed not in his night clothes, but in a perfectly pressed suit of dark wool, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the dim light. His silver watch was set exactly, his mustaches curled into their impeccable arcs. Monsieur Hastings would laugh, he murmured to himself, but Poirot must always be prepared, even for phantoms. At 10:30, he began his vigil. The corridors of Whitehaven stretched long and shadowy, lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow him. His cane tapped softly against the boards as he walked, pausing at intervals to listen. Each creak of timber, each sigh of wind was noted, catalogued, judged. He stopped at the locked east wing. The heavy door loomed before him like the gate to another world. He tried the handle, still locked. Yet as he bent to inspect the keyhole, he felt the faintest draft of cold air against his cheek, as though the darkness beyond had exhaled. "Interesting," he whispered. It was near midnight when the first whisper came. "Edmund." Poirot froze. The sound drifted down the corridor, hollow, mournful, yet clear as a bell. He followed it, his footsteps measured, his eyes sharp. Again the whisper. The key. It led him toward the grand staircase, where the shadows pooled deepest. There upon the lowest step lay the silver key. It gleamed faintly, as if it generated its own pale light. Poirot bent, examining it closely. He touched the surface with his gloved hand, then lifted it to his nose. Ah, but of course, Polish, very fresh, and polish, it has a scent, oui. He pocketed the key and turned slowly. The corridor was empty, yet he felt, with absolute certainty, that someone had watched him from the shadows. He remained awake until dawn, but no further disturbances came. The household gathered for breakfast with faces drawn and weary. Lord Willoughby's hand shook so violently he could barely lift his teacup. Lady Margaret looked as though she had aged 10 years overnight. Charles alone seemed invigorated, though his eyes held a flicker of unease he tried in vain to conceal. Poirot laid the key upon the table. It returned as always. Upon the staircase at midnight, Lady Margaret gave a cry of despair. Then the legend is true. The phantom will not rest until it claims Edmund. "Non, madam," Poirot said firmly. "It is not the phantom that leaves this key. It is a human hand, and it is that hand which Poirot shall reveal." He turned to Lord Willoughby. "Tell me, monsieur, this legend of Sir Alaric, what is its true origin?" Willoughby sighed heavily. "It is said that Sir Alaric returned from the Crusades with a fortune in silver and jewels. Rather than surrender it to the crown, He hid it within Whitehaven Manor. The key was meant to guard the secret chamber, but he died before revealing its location. Since then, many have searched. Some claimed to hear his ghost, warning them away. All failed, and none found the treasure. None. Yet every generation, whispers rise again, and fools waste their lives chasing shadows. Poirot nodded slowly, and now the legend is resurrected with a key to match. But legends, M.S. Amos, are often used by the clever to disguise the truth. That afternoon, Poirot requested a tour of the manor. Benson, the butler, guided him through the grand halls, the parlors, the library, and finally the chapel. The little sanctuary was crumbling with age, its stained glass windows cracked, its pews coated with dust. Yet upon the altar lay a single object polished to a gleam, a silver candlestick. Poirot touched it, then smiled faintly. Ah, the same polish. Tell me, Benson, who attends to the silver? Mrs. Havers, sir. She is most particular about it. Indeed. Then she is the one who has access to the polish. N.S.C. Pa. Yes, sir, but she would never. Poirot raised a hand. I accuse no one, my good man. I observe only. As I left the chapel, Poirot lingered behind. He pressed his hand against the stone wall, feeling for irregularities. His eyes narrowed. The mortar, it is newer here, he whispered. Could it be? But Benson called to him, and Poirot rejoined him without further comment. That evening, Poirot found Lady Margaret alone in the drawing-room. She stood before the fire, her face pale in the glow. You do not believe me, she said softly, but I swear, the phantom is real. When I was a girl, I too heard it, the whisper of Sir Alaric, echoing in the east wing. I begged Edmund never to reopen those doors. Poirot approached gently. And yet, madam, fear, it clouds the reason. Often we see phantoms where there are none. Tell me, did you hear the whisper again last night? She closed her eyes. Yes, it called to Edmund. It always calls to him. Never to me, never to Charles. Only to him. Curious, indeed. Poirot's mustaches twitched. Why Edmund, and no other? Before she could answer, Charles entered, his expression bright. What's this, Poirot? Trying to chase ghosts out of my poor aunt's head. Poirot smiled thinly. Not ghosts, monsieur. Only men who pretend to be them. Charles laughed, though it rang hollow. Well, I wish you luck. You'll need it. That night, Poirot prepared once more for his vigil. He sat alone in the library, a small lamp burning at his side. The fire crackled softly, casting long shadows upon the shelves. He opened a book, Agatha Christie's The Mystery of the Blue Train, and pretended to read. But his ears, they listened for every sound. At 11:30, a floorboard creaked in the corridor. Poirot did not move. He waited. Another creak, closer now. A shadow fell across the door. Then, softly, ever so softly, the whisper began. Edmund, the key, the kit. Poirot rose noiselessly and slipped into the corridor. The figure ahead was cloaked in darkness, moving swiftly toward the study. Poirot followed at a distance, silent as a cat. The figure paused at the study door, bent low, and placed the silver key upon the threshold. Poirot stepped forward. Bonsoir, mon ami. Perhaps you dropped something? The figure whirled, and in the lamplight, Poirot saw the face of Charles. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Charles laughed, though there was no mirth in it. You're quick, Poirot. I thought I was careful enough. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Careful, yes, but not enough for Hercule Poirot. Tell me, why play the phantom? Charles's smile faded. His voice dropped low. Because the treasure is real. And I'll have it. Phantoms or no. My uncle is too weak, too frightened. But I will find it. The key is the guide. The whisper's a distraction. Poirot studied him. So, it is you who whispered? Charles hesitated, then shook his head. Not always. I use my voice some nights, yes. But last night, I swear, it was not me. Poirot's brows lifted. Huh? Then we have two phantoms, one of flesh and one, perhaps, of greater cunning. Charles's face darkened. Believe what you will, but I will find the treasure, and if you stand in my way. He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. He turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Poirot alone with the key once more. Poirot lifted it, his eyes glittering. Two phantoms indeed, but the truth, she will not remain hidden. Tomorrow, I look deeper into the past. For in the past, always, lies the answer. He slipped the key into his pocket, his mind racing. The whispers of the past were calling, and Hercule Poirot was ready to listen. Chapter 4: The Labyrinth of Deception. The following day broke with a cold clarity. The sea crashed mercilessly against the cliffs, and the manor seemed to shrink under the weight of the storm that threatened to break overhead. Whitehaven was no longer merely a house. It was a stage, and upon its stage played a drama of shadows, lies, and fear. Poirot sat in the breakfast room, savoring his coffee with deliberate calm. His eyes, however, were alive with thought. Lady Margaret nibbled at a slice of toast, her hands trembling. Lord Willoughby stared blankly at his plate, and Charles, though outwardly jaunty, could not quite conceal the tension in his shoulders. At last Poirot spoke. "Mess Amos, the matter grows clearer. One phantom I have unmasked, Monsieur Charles, who uses the key to play upon the fears of his uncle. Yet another phantom remains, one whose voice echoes in these halls though the speaker is unseen." Charles leaned back, a mocking smile on his lips. "You make me sound a villain, Poirot. I sought the treasure, yes, but I never wished my uncle harm. I only borrowed the legend to cover my search." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Borrowed legends, monsieur, are like borrowed fire. They burn not only the hands but the house itself." Lord Willoughby slammed his fist weakly upon the table. "Enough of this treasure. I care nothing for gold or jewels. I want only peace in my house. Poirot, I beg you, end this nightmare." Poirot inclined his head. "You have my word, my lord. But first, we must look to the past. For it is in the past that the roots of this phantom lie." That afternoon, Poirot descended to the manor archives, a dim chamber beneath the library, heavy with dust and age. Rows of ledgers, journals, and yellowed parchments lined the shelves. He donned a pair of white gloves, his fastidious nature offended by the grime, and began his search. Hours passed in silence, but for the rustle of pages. Poirot uncovered letters from centuries past, deeds to lands long sold, inventories of goods both mundane and rare. And then, at last, he found it, a journal bound in cracked leather, bearing the crest of the Willoughby family. It was the journal of Sir Alaric himself. Poirot read carefully the old script winding across the page. "The silver key is mine. It opens not a door, but a secret, one hidden deep within these walls. The treasure I have sworn to guard shall never fall into unworthy hands. To those who seek it, I leave only whispers, warnings that death shall be their reward." Poirot tapped the page thoughtfully. "Ah, so the whispers, they began with him. But who now continues them?" He turned another page and froze. A crude map had been sketched, a layout of Whitehaven Manor, with a mark upon the east wing. "The east wing," Poirot murmured. "Always the east wing." That evening, he gathered the household in the drawing-room. The fire crackled, lightning flashed at the windows, and the storm began to break in earnest. "My friends," Poirot announced, holding the journal aloft, "the treasure of Sir Alaric is no mere tale. It is real, hidden within these walls. The silver key is not only a symbol, it is the instrument to reveal the secret, and the whispers, they are meant to guard it. But now, someone has taken upon themselves the role of phantom." Lady Margaret's face drained of color. Then we are cursed." The treasure has awakened its guardian once more. Non, madame. Curses do not interest Poirot, but human greed, it is always of interest. Charles laughed bitterly. So, Poirot, you found your proof? Then let us open the east wing and see for ourselves. Lord Willoughby rose unsteadily. No, that wing is dangerous. It has been sealed for years. Poirot regarded him closely. Dangerous or secretive, my lord? For your ancestor marked it upon this map, and I believe it is there the phantom leads us. Willoughby swayed, his face pale. Lady Margaret rushed to his side. He cannot bear it, Poirot. Leave the past buried. But Poirot's mustaches bristled with determination. No, madame. For buried pasts, they do not remain so. They rise, always, to haunt the present. Later that night, Poirot crept once more through the halls. The storm howled beyond the walls, rain lashing the windows, thunder rolling across the cliffs. He carried only a lamp and the silver key, which glinted coldly in the flame's glow. He paused before the east wing door. Slowly, he inserted the key into the lock. To his surprise, it turned smoothly, as though the lock had been oiled only recently. Ah, he whispered, so the door is not as abandoned as one claims. The hinges groaned as the door opened. Beyond lay a corridor heavy with dust and decay. Wallpaper peeled in strips, floorboards sagged, and cobwebs draped the corners. Yet Poirot noted at once. Footprints marked the dust, fresh and unmistakable. He followed them cautiously deeper into the wing. The whispers began again, faint at first, then louder. Edmund, leave, leave. Poirot's grip tightened on his lamp. You try to frighten me, oui? But Hercule Poirot, he does not frighten. The footprints led him to a narrow door at the far end of the corridor. He pressed his ear to it. Silence. Slowly, he opened it. Within was a small chamber, bare but for a single chest of iron, bound with heavy chains. The air smelled of damp stone and old metal. Upon the chest's surface lay carvings of a skull and a key. Poirot's eyes gleamed. At last, the treasure. He bent to examine the lock. The silver key fit perfectly. But before he could turn it, a voice behind him hissed. Step away, Poirot. He turned. In the doorway stood Lady Margaret, her face pale but resolute. In her hand she held a revolver. Ah, Poirot said softly. So it is you, madam. The second phantom. Her hand trembled, but her eyes blazed with desperation. You should never have come here, Poirot. I warned Edmund years ago. The treasure must remain hidden. Do you not see? It destroys everyone who seeks it. Charles, my fool of a nephew, is already corrupted. And you will unearth secrets that should die with me. Poirot's voice was calm, steady. No, madam, it is not the treasure that destroys. It is the greed for it. And the whispers, they are yours, are they not? You sought to protect your husband by playing upon his fears. Her lips trembled. Yes, I created the phantom. I whispered in the halls. I moved the key, all to keep him away from this cursed chest. And yet, madam, your love betrays itself. In your attempt to protect, you created the very terror that is killing him. Fear, it is more deadly than any blade. She lowered the revolver slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I wanted only to keep him safe. Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle. Then let us end it, madam. Let us open the chest, and the secret will be known. And then, perhaps, peace will return. Together, they turned the key. The chains fell away, the lock clicked open, and the chest creaked as its lid was raised. Inside lay not gold, not jewels, but bones. The skeleton of a man, clothed in rotted armor, a rusted sword across his chest. Lady Margaret gasped. Sir Alaric. Poirot bowed his head. So the treasure was never riches. It was the body of your ancestor, hidden away. The whispers were his curse upon those who sought what was not there. Lightning flashed, thunder roared, and the truth lay revealed. Poirot closed the chest gently. At last, the phantom is no more. The silver key, it was never meant to unlock wealth. It unlocked only the past. Lady Margaret sank to her knees, sobbing. What have I done? I built a ghost from lies, when the truth was enough. Poirot touched her shoulder. Courage, madam. The labyrinth of deception is ended. But now we must face what is left behind. Chapter 5. The Phantom Revealed. The storm raged long into the night, tearing at the cliffs with a fury as though the sea itself wished to swallow Whitehaven Manor whole. Within, silence had fallen after the discovery of the chest. Lady Margaret wept quietly by the fire, her revolver discarded. Lord Willoughby lay upstairs, his health faltering under the weight of secrets too long borne. And Hercule Poirot sat alone, the silver key turning slowly between his fingers. He did not smile, for the case was not yet complete. Non, he murmured to himself. The bones of Sir Alaric, they tell us much, but not all. There's still the matter of the living phantom. For though Lady Margaret confessed to the whispers, Poirot knows, yes, he knows, that there was another hand at work. He rose, his small frame erect, his mustaches bristling with purpose. The night was not yet over. By dawn, the storm had broken. A mist lay heavy on the grounds, the sea now eerily calm. Poirot summoned the household once more to the great hall. His presence filled the chamber with quiet command. None dared to speak as he took his place by the hearth. Mess Amos, he began, you have seen what lay within the chest. The skeleton of Sir Alaric, hidden for centuries. Lady Margaret, in her love, became the phantom to shield her husband. But tell me, who oiled the lock of the east wing door? Who placed the silver key upon my chamber table when Lady Margaret could not have done so? Who sought to inflame the legend, not merely to protect, but to profit? All eyes turned instinctively to Charles. He flushed crimson, his usual bravado failing him. Now, just a minute, Poirot. I admit I searched for the treasure. Yes, but I never threatened anyone. Those whispers were her doing. He gestured wildly toward Lady Margaret. Poirot's gaze was sharp as a blade. Indeed, she whispered. But you, monsieur, you amplified the phantom. You entered the east wing at night. You left the key to taunt me. You wished to keep alive the illusion of a curse, so that, when the treasure was at last found, you might claim it for yourself without suspicion. Charles laughed bitterly. Claim it? For a pile of bones. Poirot lifted a finger. Bones, yes, but bones of a night. Do you not see? To collectors, to museums, to those who worship relics of the past, the remains of Sir Alaric would be priceless. You, monsieur, planned to sell your own ancestor. Gasps echoed around the hall. Lord Willoughby's head fell into his hands. Lady Margaret cried out in horror. Poirot advanced upon Charles, his voice now cold as steel. It was you who played the second phantom, not to protect, but to deceive. And had we not opened the chest together, you would have spirited away its contents before dawn. Charles's mask cracked. His shoulders sagged. He muttered, I needed the money. The debts were choking me. I thought if I could just... Enough! Lord Willoughby thundered, his frail voice filled with sudden strength. Better you were penniless, Charles, than a traitor to your blood. Charles lowered his head, defeated. The truth at last lay bare. Poirot turned to the family, his tone gentler now. You see, mes amis, the phantom was no spirit, no curse. It was but the invention of fear and the corruption of greed. Lady Margaret whispered to protect her husband. Charles schemed to enrich himself. And in between, your house trembled, your peace was shattered. He placed the silver key upon the mantelpiece. Let it remain here, a reminder. The key that unlocked not treasure, but truth. Lord Willoughby rose unsteadily, supported by his wife. Poirot, we can never repay you. You have freed us from shadows that haunted these halls for centuries. Poirot inclined his head. It is enough, my lord. that peace returns to Whitehaven. Guard it well, for shadows are always waiting to creep back when men allow them. That evening, Poirot stood upon the cliffs. The sea stretched endlessly, glittering beneath the fading sun. Hastings joined him, his faithful companion silent for a time before speaking. "Well, Poirot, I must say, I rather thought it was all ghosts and curses myself. To think it was only lies and greed all along. Still, it makes one wonder. Do you believe in such things? Phantoms, I mean." Poirot chuckled softly. "Non, mon ami. The only phantoms are those within the human heart. Fear, jealousy, avarice. They whisper louder than any spirit. Is those phantoms that Poirot hunts, and those alone." Hastings smiled ruefully. "And the silver key?" Poirot twirled his mustache, eyes twinkling. "Ah, that little object is symbolic, Hastings. For every key opens something, but not always what we expect. Sometimes it opens not a door, but the truth itself." And with that, they turned back toward the manor, the wind carrying away the last faint echo of the phantom that would trouble Whitehaven Manor no more. Thus ends the tale of the Phantom's Silver Key, a mystery not of curses, but of shadows cast by human hearts. Hercule Poirot once more reminds us that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the light. And now, dear listener, if this story has kept you at the edge of your seat, if you walk the stormy halls of Whitehaven Manor with Poirot at your side, then I invite you, join us again. Subscribe, share this tale with fellow lovers of mystery, and keep the lantern of curiosity burning. For in every shadow, there is a story. And who knows, the next phantom may already be waiting just beyond the door.